or as one told the Globe 2 years ago, it's really about who you are. Do you have good values? It's the old New England mentality, right? Good values. Now, let's just be clear about the old country club that's 135 years old, right? Good values, like not allowing Jewish people in until the 1970s, or maybe women weren't allowed to join till 1989, or African Americans weren't allowed to join till 1994. Now, let me tell you something about clubs, all right? The church has no business being a club. Here's the thing about clubs. Clubs are about control. And I think there was a small group of people, I'm going to say guys, probably guys, all right, a small group of people at a country club that just felt like they were just higher and high to be able to tell Tom Brady and Giselle no. It's a form of control. I don't care who you are, we get to decide who's in and out of the what? Out of the club. I say that because, let me tell you something. The church, if it ever becomes a club, I'll be the first one in line to burn it down. Burn the place down if this place becomes a club. Where we begin to control and manipulate who gets to be here and who doesn't get to be here. Where we begin to decide who's worthy or who's unworthy to be in our midst. Does that make sense what I'm saying? This morning I want to talk about this because I think God really doesn't like clubs. He doesn't like these man-made institutions that we begin to measure up one another as to who's worthy or unworthy of a relationship with us. Who we get to love or who we get to connect with. And so this story starts off really in Acts chapter 9. And we've been working our way through the Bible, and we've been in the book of Acts right now. Last week, we ended with the story of Saul. Remember that? Saul is on his horse, gets knocked off, comes face to face with the Lord. And remember, his eyes are covered with skin. Ananias comes, lays his hands on him, baptizes him. He's able to see again. And then later, after spending time with Jesus, comes to Damascus and preaches the gospel. I mean, really, for Saul, the Darth Vader of the Jewish faith, to come and become a Christian and to begin preaching Jesus was absolutely mind-blowing. The people in Damascus couldn't take it, so they tried to kill him. You remember being lowered out of a basket out the outside wall. He goes to Jerusalem. The apostles have a hard time recognizing that Saul really is who he says he is, and so they ship him to Tarsus. And there's a little line there. If you go to Acts chapter 9, verse 31, it says, "Then the church throughout Judea, Galilee, and Samaria enjoyed a time of peace and was strengthened." I think partially because Saul, who was really the spearhead of this persecution of Christians, when he became a believer, it all kind of died out. There wasn't a champion to that cause. And so during that time, the church actually gets a respite from all the persecution. And so the author, Luke, of the book of Acts, says, okay, so that little story's done. Now I want us to focus back on Peter and the church in Jerusalem. Okay, so there's a shift here in the story. So Saul is he goes from being a hater of Christians to being one himself, and he's going to be an apostle to the Gentiles, right? That's what he's called, an apostle to the Gentiles. So that part of the story kind of gets laid out. Now Luke's going to say, now I want to take you to another story where this is beginning to happen as well. And this takes us to Acts chapter 9, verse 32. Here we go. As Peter traveled about the country, he went to visit the Lord's people who lived in Lydda. And there he found a man named Aeneas who was paralyzed and had been bedridden for 8 years. Aeneas, Peter said to him, "Jesus Christ heals you. Get up, roll up your mat." And immediately Aeneas got up, and all those who lived in Lydda and Sharon saw him, and they turned to the Lord. In Joppa, there was a disciple named Tabitha. In the Greek, her name is Dorcas, which, by the way, when's the last time you heard of a woman named Dorcas? I think we need to bring that back in vogue again. Like, I don't know, if you're going to have girls, Dorcas is a good name, right? I mean, I think, Gary, right? There you go, right there. All right. Heard it from him first. All right. She was always doing good and helping the poor. And about that time she became sick and she died, and her body was washed and placed in an upstairs room. Lydda was near Joppa, so when the disciples heard that Peter was in Lydda, they sent 2 men to him and urged him, "Please come at once." So Peter went with them, and when he arrived, he was taken upstairs to the room. And all the widows stood around him, crying and showing him the robes and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was still with them. And Peter sent them all out of the room. And then he got down on his knees and he prayed. And turning towards the dead woman, he said, "Tabitha, get up." And she opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He took her by the hand and helped her to her feet. And then he called for the believers, especially the widows, and presented her to them alive. This became known all over Joppa, and many people believed in the Lord. And Peter stayed in Joppa for some time. Now this is interesting. Some time with a tanner named Simon. We'll get back to that just briefly. So Peter leaves Jerusalem, goes up to Lydda and then to Joppa. And what he's really doing, he's kind of encouraging these Christians. Because remember in Acts 8, persecution hit the church and the Christians had gotten scattered. And so there's little churches, little pockets of believers all around Samaria, Judea, all up and down the coastline there. And so Peter decides, I'm going to assume the apostles all kind of spread out to kind of take care of some of these satellite churches that had just happened by persecution. So his assignment, it seems, is to go northwest from Jerusalem to the coastline. Because of course, Peter gets first dibs. Who wants to go to the coast, right? That's where he's going to spend some time. So he gets to Lydda, does the miracle we read about, and then from there, people come to know the Lord. And so he's called to Joppa to help out Tabitha/Dorcas. And it's really interesting. The way that he heals Dorcas is really similar to Luke chapter 8, the way Jesus heals the girl that died. Remember that? The mom and the dad, they're crying, they're weeping. And Jesus comes in and says, "She's not dead, she's just sleeping." And everybody kind of laughs at him. I don't know if you remember the story out of Luke 8. So what Jesus does is he clears the house, speaks to the little girl, grabs her by the hand and lifts her up. Well, you can see Peter shows up at Joppa and he's like, well, this is what Jesus did when this happened. I'm sure he's saying it in his head. All right, everybody clear the room. So, which isn't a bad thing, by the way. I just want to take a little bit of a sidestep here and just say this to us. Whenever you're in doubt in a situation, you can always ask the question, if Jesus was here, what would he do? If Jesus was here, what would he do in this situation? Because sometimes there's not a book, chapter, and verse on some of this stuff, right? Life hits you, and you're just like, whoa, and then you're like, well, and sometimes you feel like, well, I got to make this up if I go along. Well, maybe, but not exactly. You can actually stop for a minute, put the pause button, and go, if Jesus was standing here right now, what do I think he would do? Now, I don't know, maybe you're wrong on it. Well, Jesus would punch him in the throat. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that we're asking ourselves things. And I think Peter's doing that. He's doing some work over in Lydda. Now he's up in Joppa. But it says here, this is the interesting part. It says he is staying at the house of a guy named what? Simon the who? Simon the tanner. Anybody know what a tanner is? And it's not a sunbather, by the way, before you ask. Okay, what's a tanner? Anybody want to say? Anyone want to tell me? A leather worker, right. So where does leather come from? Animals. That is correct. Okay. Now, to his name's Simon, that means that's a Jewish name, but he has the job of skinning animals and making leather or some type of leather type product from his home, which is on the sea. Which, by the way, any home that's usually along the sea is normally that would be like the red light district, okay? Jewish people typically did not live by the sea. In fact, some people believe that they just had traditions that kept them away from the sea. The Philistines were actually seafaring people, so they stayed away from the sea most of the time. So to be living on the sea and to be a tanner, this Jewish guy, he's working with dead animals. Well, the Old Testament speaks pretty clearly to that. Which is, that's a big no-no. Okay? That's like Simon the bacon eater. All right? Simon the pig raiser. All right? Simon the tanner is someone that is doing an unclean, illegal activity amongst the Jews. And where is Peter staying? At his house. All right, now I want to kind of connect this to the 21st century for us Christians, all right? Imagine if you heard that I had gone to Portland and I was doing some speaking for a church up there maybe or something like that. Maybe I was speaking at let's say I was going to Boise Bible College and I was speaking at the conference, right? Did that a few months ago. And let's say you heard that I decided to stay at Simon the meth maker's house, right? Simon the drug dealer, okay? Simon he's the Heisenberg of Boise, and no, that's a wasted illustration. All right, so he's the Breaking Bad. I mean, this is a drug house. Peter is staying in a guy that deals drugs, a drug user, a drug dealer. Now, if you found out that that's where I was staying, not just because I had no other options, because that's where I chose to stay, would there not be a few that would go, that's interesting. What's he doing there? He shouldn't be there. He must have a problem. He must like leather shoes. Peter, whatever, I don't know. But the thing is that what happens is Peter is there. Here's what I believe. I believe chapter 10 is going to make sense as to why Peter is staying at the house of Simon the tanner. Because I think there's something stirring in Peter. I think he's beginning to sense something is happening. Because you got to understand, up to this point, up to Acts chapter 10, this whole Christian movement has been nothing but a Jewish movement. You had to be a Jew to become a Christian. You couldn't just be anybody and be a Christian. You had to be, if you were a Gentile, we get this out of like the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts chapter 8, right? So he was a Gentile by race, but he had become a Jew. And since he had decided to become a Jew, now he could become a Christian. And back then, to become a Jew meant not only did you have to accept the laws, but you had to be circumcised as well. This is going to come up later in the book of Acts. So we got this thing going here where Peter is beginning to sense something. Now, he can't put words to it, and I think it's challenging who he is. But the fact that he was staying at Simon the tanner's house tells me something. Something's changing in him. And we're going to see this come up in Acts chapter 10. Now, so we leave Peter staying at Simon the tanner's house, and so the author Luke says, all right, so while that's happening, we're now going to go all the way up to Caesarea, which isn't too far away from Joppa. It's up the coastline, to a guy by the name of Cornelius. Take a look. At Caesarea, there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion in what was known as the Italian regiment. He and all his family were devout. You should underline that word. Were devout and God-fearing. He gave generously to those in need, and he prayed to God regularly. And one day, about 3 p.m, he had a vision. He distinctly saw an angel of God who came to him and said, Cornelius. Now, does everybody have an exclamation point in that in your NIV there? Yeah? I mean, I don't know why the exclamation point's there. The translator, I don't know if he, Cornelius, or why it has to be so emotive, but whatever it is, it's Cornelius. And Cornelius stared at him in fear. What is it, Lord? He asked. Well, the angel answered, your prayers and the gifts to the poor have come up as a memorial offering before God. Now send men to Joppa to bring back a man named Simon who is called Peter. He's staying with Simon the tanner, whose house is by the sea. And when the angel who spoke to him had gone, Cornelius called 2 of his servants and a devout soldier who was one of his attendants. He told them everything that had happened, and he sent them to Joppa. So who is this Cornelius guy? First thing we know, he's a centurion. So he's over 100 men. We get the word century, 100 years. A centurion is someone who's over 100 men. So this guy's like a sergeant, a lieutenant in the army. He's the Italian regiment, so we get the sense he's probably from that region. Probably a Greek background, definitely Italian background. And so he's over 100 men. He's Roman. He's a complete Gentile, uncircumcised, complete, normal guy. Normal Roman guy. Except we find out that God calls him here. He says he is devout. The word here in the Greek for devout means he worships well. He is a good worshiper. And we find out in this little bit here that he did 2 things. He prayed to God and he gave to the people in need. Now, I'm really going to go along the fringe here, so I need you to just kind of hang with me for a bit on this, okay? Because sometimes people hear things that I don't say more so than they hear things that I do say, all right? Cornelius, more than likely, was not praying to Yahweh God, at least not in his mind. And Cornelius was not giving alms to the poor because it was something that God wanted him to do. He did it because he was a spiritual person. He did it because this is what he felt like he wanted to do. This was in his heart, and it's what he did. He didn't know that he was praying to the Yahweh God. I don't think he knew that his offerings were some sort of a memorial gift to God. He just did what he thought was right. Cornelius worshiped the God of his own understanding. It wasn't the Yahweh God that we teach in the Bible, at least not in his mind. So what does this mean? Well, it seems to indicate to me that God hears the prayers and honors the spirituality of those that are doing the best they can with what they know. So I want to say this for a minute because sometimes I think as Christians, we become a bit insecure at times when we come in contact with people that may worship other religions than we do. Like we think, well, we're Christians, we believe in Jesus, and so we're the only ones that are really in contact with God. Everybody else are just out there in the dark pagans. God doesn't have anything to do with them. In fact, if anything, God's mad at them. No, you're not. If you're not Christian, we're mad at you. I'm not going to listen to those prayers. Well, actually, right here, we find out that that's really not the case. So what's this mean for us? Could it be that when you drive by a church that's not like yours, something spiritual could be going on in there? Even if it's one that says Mormon across there, Jehovah's Witness across there, Baha'i across there, Buddha across there, Shiite across there. Could something spiritual be happening in that place? It seems to me the answer would be yes. Now I know there's some right here. Wait, whoa, Mike. Are you saying they're all saved? No, it's not what I'm saying. If they were all saved, then here's the thing. Cornelius wouldn't need Simon to come to the house, right? God would say, well, looks like you're doing good. You're in. Here's the thing. Every person that's in heaven has made Jesus Christ their Lord and Savior of their life. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through me. So I want to make sure everybody understands that. Because again, some people can hear me and think, well, somehow I'm just sort of a ecumenical, let's water the gospel down thing. Farthest thing from the truth. But what I am saying is that we are not creating a club. As if we that have the book are the only ones that get to have God in our life. God is at work in every single person on the planet. He's at work in all of them. Just like He's at work with me. And He loves me just as much as He loves every single person on the planet. And He's doing something in their life just like He's doing something in mine. And what's the work? He's leading every one of us to a greater knowledge of His Son, Jesus Christ. And whether you never know Him and He's leading you to that initial knowledge of Him, or whether you know Jesus and you're getting to know more of Him every day, either way, we're all on the same journey. Some are coming to the cross, some of us are coming back to the cross, but either way, we're all on a journey. And I say that because sometimes I get so nervous when I look out there and I feel like it's us against the world. And it's really not the case. It's us to the world, not us against the world. Does that make sense what I'm saying here? And that's why it's not just going out here, it's letting people in here. Like there will be people that will come that, listen, they don't believe what we believe, and they're going to do what they do. They're doing the God of their understanding, and sometimes they go, well, we got to fix that. Okay, well, maybe, but the fact of the matter is that God's doing something in their life. Let's recognize that. Because God seems to recognize it in Cornelius. And so what happens is, which by the way, he's not the only one. You know that word devout comes up right here. Look at verse 7. When the angel who spoke to him had gone, Cornelius called 2 of his servants and a devout soldier. Same Greek word. So it's not just Cornelius. It looks to me there's like a bunch of them that are, God's gotten their heart ready for a message. So as that's happening in Cornelius' house, Luke says, now let's go back to Peter over in Joppa there at Simon the tanner's house. Verse 9. So about noon the following day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up on the roof to pray, which, just by way of reminder, we do recognize a roof is not like ours. It's not like he's sitting on the ridgeline, just kind of straddling it. It's actually a porch. It's like a patio. It's like the deck at your house, okay? So he's relaxing, chilling out on the deck, and he's praying. He became hungry, and he wanted something to eat. And while the meal was being prepared, he fell into a trance. So as he's praying, he can smell the goodies coming up through the roof. That smells good. And he falls into this trance. Now remember, he's hungry. He's been praying. The Lord sets this up. Verse 11. He saw heaven open and something like a large sheet being let down to earth by its 4 corners. It contained all kinds of 4-footed animals as well as reptiles and birds. And then a voice told him, hey, Peter, get up, kill, and eat. Oh, surely not, Lord, Peter replied. I've never eaten anything impure or unclean. The voice spoke to him a second time. Hey, do not call anything impure that God has made clean. Now this happened 3 times, and immediately the sheet was taken back up to heaven. And while Peter was wondering about the meaning of the vision, the men sent by Cornelius found out where Simon's house was and stopped at the gate. So Peter's up on the roof, right? He's praying, gets hungry, falls in this trance. And it's like this sheet, and the way the Greek would make it sound, it's like all 4 corners were pulled together. So imagine like remember the old hobo days where they tie something to a stick, you put something there, tie the corners together. So it's kind of like a teardrop comes down from heaven, this sheet, and it opens up. Now I can imagine Peter's hungry, right? I think that's a part of this. He's hungry, opens it up, and on the sheet are creepy crawlies. All right, like pigs, bacon. There's birds, bugs, all kinds of stuff are going on this sheet. And he looks at it, he's like, whoa. And is it tempting? Maybe. But the Lord says to Peter, hey, I want you to kill and eat the stuff on this sheet. I know you're hungry. I want you to kill and eat it. Peter's like, oh, no way, Lord. I've never even messed with that kind of stuff. And the Lord says, Peter, I want you to hear me something here really clearly. What I call something clean, you don't call it impure. If it's clean, it's clean. And it says this happens 3 times. Now, I don't think the sheet went up and down 3 times. I think the conversation happened 3 times. So, Peter, kill it and eat it. No, not going to do it. Hey, what did I say to you? Clean, it's clean. Okay, so kill it. No, not going to do it. These 3 times. Peter really has this 3-time kind of thing down, right? That'd be a great series. Let's do the 3 times of Peter, right? The rooster crows, I love you 3 times. This whole 3 times thing's really, he's got a pretty thick skull, almost as thick as mine. And it comes down 3 times. Now, let's just make sure we understand, keeping this in context. He's staying at Simon the tanner's house, which we said is kind of like a drug house. For that sheet to come down and be put in front of him, this would be like God bringing a sheet down before you, and when it opens up, it's full of crack pipes, heroin needles, the whole pills, opiates, drugs, total illegal drugs on this sheet. And he said, Mike, I want you to smoke it, drink it, and inject it. Oh Lord, I've never even touched anything like that. And he says, what I say is clean is clean. You don't get to call it unclean. I do. And I say it's clean, it's clean. Do it. No, I'm not doing it. Do it. Now, before any of you take this snippet of this sermon and go home and say, the pastor said I can do weed, all right? Well, you heard what you wanted to hear. All right, but What I'm giving you is the gut-wrenching context for Peter for some of us are like, Mike, that's crazy. That's so crazy. God would never do it. That's insane crazy. That's the way Peter feels about this. This is insane what you're asking. To eat things that I shouldn't be eating, that's unclean. You said it was unclean. God says, not anymore. Not anymore. So it says here in 17, while Peter was wondering about the meaning of the vision, the men show up. I think it's important to say two things about this, because I think it's great that Peter takes time to contemplate this vision. And I think he asks himself two questions. We've said this before, I want to repeat it, okay? The two questions are, what does this mean, and what am I to do? Whenever the Lord brings something into your life like this, where it's confusing, and it's right in front of you, where it's a paradox a lot of times, right? It could go this way, it could go this way. This would be good, and this would be good. You have to step back and say, what does this mean, and what am I to do? Confusion is God's way of slowing you down and getting you to think. Whenever you're confused, slow down, ask yourself those two questions. What does this mean, and what am I to do? And Peter's thinking about this, okay? And it shows up. So, these men show up, and here's what happens, verse 18. They called out, asking if Simon, who was known as Peter, was staying there. And while Peter was thinking about the vision, the Spirit said to him, Holy Spirit said to him, hey, Simon, there are men looking for you, so get up and go downstairs. Do not hesitate to go with them, for I have sent them. And Peter went down and said to the men, I'm the one you're looking for. Why have you come? And the men replied, well, we've come from Cornelius the centurion. He's a righteous and God-fearing man who is respected by all the Jewish people. A holy angel told him to ask you to come to his house so that he could hear what you have to say. And then Peter invited the men into the house to be his guests. And so he recognizes that God's on the move, right? So this picks us up as Peter's going to go to Cornelius' house now. Here we go. The next day, Peter started out with them, and some of the believers from Joppa went along. The following day, he arrived in Caesarea, and Cornelius was expecting them and had called together his relatives and close friends. As Peter entered the house, Cornelius met him, and he fell at his feet in reverence. But Peter made him get up. Stand up, he said, I'm only a man myself. And while talking with him, Peter went inside and found a large gathering of people. He said to them, you are well aware that it is against our law for a Jew to associate or even visit a Gentile. So this whole entourage leaves Joppa. It's quite a few people because Peter has his own crew. Cornelius sent a crew. And so they're all make their way back. Now, Cornelius knows this is happening, right? So he invites his family, his friends, everybody come on down. Simon Peter's coming here. I don't know what he's going to say, but let's come check it out. So they all show a big reunion, like welcome Peter is hanging from the roof, like this. And hey, let's light some candles for Peter. And everyone's going to do this thing. Hey, make a cake, says welcome Peter. And everyone's excited. And so Peter shows up. And what does Cornelius do? He gets to the door and Cornelius falls flat on his face and begins to worship Peter. Question, why did he do that? Anybody have a guess? Why would he do that? Because of what? Reputation? Okay, good. What else? It's kind of weird, isn't it? I'll give you my answer, okay? My opinion. Because I don't think he knew what else to do. Remember, he's not a Christian. What do you do when... I remember being a kid and people were talking about meeting the Pope. If I had to meet the Pope and I wasn't a believer, let's say I had no spiritual direction. I was a spiritual person but didn't have spiritual direction. I met the Pope. You know what I do with the Pope? I guess I would I don't know, get down on a knee, I don't know what you do. What are you supposed to do? I don't know. Yeah, fist bump, whatever. I know this guy's important, and I guess when you're important, you're supposed to get down on the ground and revere him and lay yourself down before him and stuff like that. Here's the thing, friends. I just want to make this, this is so good, okay? People are going to come in this place, and they're going to do what they know. People come to church, and sometimes, we had a gal come here one time. No joke, this is so awesome. it was a gal and her husband. I had met them at Walmart, and they were going to come to church. They came and they brought their dog. Now, their dog was a little dog. It was like a miniature wiener dog, right? And I knew it. They were sitting right here, and I was sitting here, and I was kind of looking off to the side, and they had their little wiener dog. They were hiding it. Because can you bring a dog to church? I don't know. We've had a goat in church before. Literally, we have. And can you bring dogs into the church and do church with a dog? I don't know. She tried. It seemed to work. And so anyways, she doing this. Anyways, so here's the thing. So we're doing communion like we do now. She went up and she got a communion cup and a wafer for her dog. And so she's giving her dog communion. Giving her dog communion, giving her a little wafer. Which I thought, that was kind of interesting. And so this gal, she moved away already, but she was sitting right behind him. She came up to me after. She says, "Pastor, I got to talk to you. And she's never said 2 words to me her entire life about anything negative. I'm not one to complain, but that was really weird to see her giving communion to a dog. What do you think about that?" I think the dog is saved. No, I didn't say that. I said the dog did what the dog did. Listen, she did what she thought, right? That's all people do. Listen, is she going to grow from there? Sure she will. But Cornelius is doing what he thinks he ought to do. And Peter, God bless him, just helps him up and says, hey, stand up, come here. Hey, listen, I'm just a man. Lesson 1, I'm just a man. If you're here this morning and you're visiting for the first time, I just want you to know this real clearly. I'm just a guy. Okay? I don't like the title pastor, because the truth is that you only have one pastor, one shepherd. His name's Jesus Christ. Okay? My whole goal in my life is to point you to Him and try to get out of the way the best I can. Sometimes people like to put me in the way. No, I'm going to get out of the way. Okay? And sometimes in my dementedness, I'll actually chase you to Jesus. Like, oh, that guy's driving me nuts. And chase you to the Lord. Whatever way you get there is fine. But I just want to get out of the way. But for him, it was really tough. Cornelius, it was really tough. Think how awkward that would be. What do you do? And so, Peter goes on. Here we go. While talking with him, Peter went into the house and found a large gathering. It says, you're well aware that I'm not supposed to be here, but here it is. But God has shown me, this is a key verse, but God has shown me that I should not call anyone impure or unclean. This is for Peter. He's like, I'm beginning to figure out, what does this mean? What am I supposed to do? I'm beginning to learn that I've had prejudices that have been taught to me, that are ingrained in me, that I've got to let go. That I thought I was doing it for God, but actually I was doing it for myself. I've got fears. I didn't know the grace of God could go that far. But God has shown me that I should not call anyone impure or unclean. So when I was sent, I came without raising an objection. There you go. What does it mean? What am I to do? May I ask why you sent me? Cornelius answered, 3 days ago I was in my house praying at this hour at 3 p.m. Suddenly a man, shining clothes, stood before me. And he said, Cornelius, God has heard your prayer and remembered your gifts to the poor. Send to Joppa for Simon, who is called Peter. He's a guest in the home of Simon the tanner, who lives by the sea. So I went for you immediately, and it was good of you to come. Now we are all here in the presence of God to listen to everything the Lord has commanded you to tell us. And then Peter began to speak. I now realize, listen to this, I now realize. Did he know it before? Nope. Right now, I now realize how true it is that God does not show favoritism, but accepts from every nation the one who fears Him and does what is right. Nobody is held back from the love of God. Everybody's accepted. Now, it says here pretty clearly, right? The one who fears Him and does what is right. Everybody has an opportunity. The invitation is for everyone to trust the Lord. There is no favoritism here. But he didn't know that until he was right in the middle of it. So he's learning. He's growing. He's realizing the Gentiles actually are just like Jews as it comes to the cross. The rich, the poor, everybody. They're all the same. He goes on to say, you know the message God sent to the people of Israel, announcing the good news of peace through Jesus Christ, who is Lord of all. You know what has happened throughout the province of Judea, beginning in Galilee after the baptism that John preached. How God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Spirit and power, and how he went around and doing good and healing all who were under the power of the devil, because God was with him. And we are witnesses of everything he did in the country of the Jews and in Jerusalem, that they killed him, that they killed Jesus by hanging him on a cross, or some of your translations on a tree, hanging him on a tree, but God raised him from the dead on the third day and caused him to be seen. He was not seen by all the people, but by witnesses whom God had already chosen, by us who ate with him and we drank with him after he rose from the dead, saying he was not a ghost. He's not a figment of our imagination. He was real. He commanded us to preach to the people and to testify that he is the one whom God appointed as judge of the living and the dead. And all the prophets testify about him, that everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness of sins through Jesus Christ. There's not a single person on the planet that cannot receive eternal life found in Jesus Christ. Not a single person. No matter what nationality you are, no matter how much money you make or don't make, whether you got up this morning and you live healthy or whether you woke up in your own vomit, it doesn't matter. Everybody is loved by God and has an opportunity to become a child of God through Jesus Christ. Every person. And it's in that truth that we have something to give the world. Everybody. We have a message for the world. Do you understand why clubs don't work? Everybody needs to hear this. Everybody needs to see it in us. Everybody needs to believe. Don't you think Cornelius says, hey, thank you so much for coming? That the fact that Peter shows up into a Gentile's house, apart from all of the tradition, says, you know, I'll step across the line and I'll be here. I'll be present with you when I share this. This is huge. This is so huge. And it's so challenging for Peter. But he stands and he shares the love of God. He's present and he's honest. Which are the two greatest things that come with sharing Jesus to the world. Be present and be honest. About yourself and about others. Listen, do you think when Peter walked into the house, it was a Jewish house? No, it's a Gentile house. It's like walking into a drug house for him. Like he steps in and there on the coffee table's a bong. There's there's stuff hanging from the walls. There's stuff in the sink. There's all kind. I mean, you picture the house, and he comes in, and it's a flop house with a bunch of flop people around there, and he's in there, and he realizes, do you know what? That person that's half passed out on that couch is loved just as much as I do. Man. I'm no better than anyone. God shows no favoritism. It's easy to talk about, right? So 4th of July, I shared this a couple weeks ago with our Bible study on Thursday. So 4th of July, my wife and I, it was a hot day, and so we went down to the pet parade early in the morning, had a good time at the pet parade, and went back home, dropped the dog off. We're like, hey, what are we going to do? It's about like 1 o'clock, 1:30. We're like, hey, I know, let's go float the river. We'll go float the river. And so we put in at the old mill, and we're like, well, we normally pull out at Drake Park, right? But Drake Park was totally filled up because of the festival, because of 4th of July and all that. We're like, well, I know what we'll do. We'll just park on the other side of the river. We'll park at at Columbia Park, and we'll just pull out there. And so we get in the river, totally great time. You know, we love floating the river. It's a great time. Anyway, so we get down there. It's about 2 o'clock, I suppose, 2:30, and we get to the pullout, and there's people everywhere. There's people on that footbridge there that crosses there at Columbia Park, and kids are jumping off and stuff. We usually see some kids, but it was just packed. So we get out, or we get closer to where the pullout is, there where the rocks are, and there's people that are like not totally dressed. Jumping in, just, it's like, whoa! And so we're paddling up. Now, we can't just we'll just pass by. Our car is parked there. When we get out, and we can smell either they just butchered 100 skunks or there was a cannabis party somewhere, all right? We get out of that place, and who would have known that the Freedom Ride ends at Columbia Park 10 minutes before we got there? We get out, and I got this thing about it, and there are people, they are so lit, it's unbelievable. And I mean, people walking around, and I think they're walking around at least, And we get out of there, and the first thing I feel, this is the first thing I feel, okay, we got to get out of here as quick as we can. So we put this thing, and there's people just kind of mulling around, and they really can't see us. I don't know why, the dilation, I guess, or something. So I'm having to I'm pushing people. We can't get through the lawn to get to the road because there's just bikes strung out everywhere. It's almost like you're just walking through like its own little pathway with bikes everywhere, and we're just pushing people. And I know some of these kids, because most of them are 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids that are there, most of them. And some of them I knew because my oldest boy went to school with them. I coached some of them. Some of them, hey, Coach Mike! And I'm like, whatever. So I'm just pushing through, keep my head down. There's stuff everywhere, okay? I'm thinking to myself, all right, I'm a mandatory reporter. I can't look at any of this or else they're all busted, And so I'm working my way through. I get to the car, and I'm like, man, that's crazy. And for the next half hour, I'm like, can you believe that? As we're driving away, can you believe what in the world's going on? And you know what it dawned on me as I was studying this week? Yeah, I guess I'm just not going to let him into my club. What does it mean? What am I to do? I didn't take time to find out what does this mean. Why would God put me in the middle of that? Why? I think if I would have asked and sincerely asked, I think I would have known, hey, we can go put our inner tube away, but at least let's walk back in. It's easy to talk about, isn't it? When I was in Bible college, I found out that my roommate was gay. Bible college, my roommate was gay, and that he was a male prostitute for Boise State University. I remember getting a love on him, and he accepted Christ for the first time while in college. And there's a whole story to it, but so we just got to learn, don't we? As we're moving and we're growing, that there's really a whole world out there that needs the thing that God has given us. So on that note, what I want to do is I want to show a video. I showed this a couple years ago. It's one of my most favorite videos on this subject, and then we're going to pray. But I want you to listen as somebody else challenges us about what it means to think outside of our own prejudices when it comes to the gospel. So take a look.
Was dead and is alive. Come on, celebrate. Celebrate, celebrate. I had to go on a speaking engagement to Honolulu. Hey, sometimes you get Chicago, sometimes you get Honolulu. You go to Honolulu, you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning if you're from the East Coast because of the time difference, and I was hungry. I went looking for something to eat up a side street. I found a greasy spoon. I went in. There were no booths, just a row of stools in front of the counter. I sat down. There was nobody in the place. I didn't touch the menu. It was one of those plastic menus, and grease had piled up on it. And I knew that if I opened the thing, something extraterrestrial would have crawled out. This fat guy with a greasy apron, unshaved, cigar comes out, puts the cigar down and says, "What do you want?" I said, "A cup of coffee and a donut." He poured the coffee, and then he did this. And he picked up the donut. I hate that. So I'm sitting there, 3:30 in the morning, munching on my dirty donut. Went into this place, come about 10 or 11 prostitutes. And they sat on either side of me. And it was a small place. And I tried to disappear. The one next to me was especially boisterous, and she said to her friend, "Tomorrow's my birthday. I'm going to be 39. And her friend said, "So what do you want me to do? Sing happy birthday? So you're going to be 39. You want a cake? You want a party?" First woman said, "Look, I don't want anything. I'm just telling you it's my birthday. Why do you have to hurt my feelings?" And then she added, "I've never had a birthday party in my whole life. I don't expect to have one now." That did it. I waited until they left. And then I called Harry over. I said, "Do they come in here every night?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "The one right next to me." He said, "Agnes." I said, "It's her birthday tomorrow, Harry. What do you say we decorate this place? And when she comes in tomorrow night, we have a little party for her. She's never had a party in her whole life." He grabbed my hand and squeezed it and said, "Mister, that's beautiful. Beautiful. She ain't come out here. This guy wants to throw a birthday party for Agnes. It's her birthday tomorrow." She came out and she said, "Oh, mister, that's brilliant. Nobody ever does anything for Agnes, and she's one of the good people in this town. I know what she does to make money, but she's a good person." I said, "Can I decorate the place?" She said, "To your heart's content." I said, "I'm going to bring a big birthday cake." Harry said, "Oh, no, the cake's my thing." Oh, jeez. So I got there the next morning at about 2:30. I bought this crepe paper at the Kmart. I strung it across the place. I had made a big sign, "Happy Birthday, Agnes," put it on the mirror behind the counter. I had the place spruced. It was ready. Jan, who did the cooking, had gotten the word out on the street. By 3:15, every single prostitute in Honolulu was squeezed into this diner. It was wall-to-wall prostitutes. And me. 3:30 in the morning, the door opens. In comes Agnes and her friends. I've got everybody set, everybody ready. As they come to the door, we yell, "Happy birthday, Agnes!" and start cheering like mad. I've never seen anybody so stunned in my life. Her knees buckled. They steadied her. They got her down on a stool, and we started singing, "Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you." And they brought out the cake with the candles. That was it. She lost it and started to cry. Harry just stood there with the cake, with all the candles. Said, "Knock it off. Come on, Agnes, knock it off and blow out the candles. Come on, blow out the candles." She tried, but she couldn't do it, so he blew out the candles. He gave her the knife and said, "Now cut the cake. Come on now, cut the cake, Agnes, cut the cake." She sat for a long moment, and then she turned to me and she said, "Mister, I really don't want to cut the cake. Is it okay if I don't cut the cake?" I said, "It's your cake. It's your cake. You can do with it what you want." She said, "I want to take it home. I want to show it to my mother. Is that okay?" I said, "Sure." She stood up. I said, "Do you have to do it now?" She said, "I live 2 doors down. Let me take the cake to her, and I promise I'll bring it right back. I promise." She picked up the cake like it was the Holy Grail, and she pushed her way through the crowd and out the door. And as the door swung slowly shut, there was dead silence. You talk about an awkward silence. All of us were just standing there, stunned. I didn't know what to say, so I finally said, "What do you say we pray?" It's weird looking back on it now. A sociologist leading a prayer meeting with a bunch of prostitutes in a diner at 3:30 in the morning. It was the right thing to do. And I prayed that God would deliver her from what filthy men had done to her, probably starting when she was too young to even know what was going on. That's how these things start. You know, some kid, 11, 12 years old, gets messed over by some filthy slob, and her self-image is destroyed, and she's ruined, and we blame her when we ought to be blaming him. And I prayed that God would make her new, because we're here to declare the good news. And no matter where you've been or what you've done, Jesus can make you new. When I finished the prayer, Harry leaned across the counter and said, "Hey, Camp Paulo, you told us you were a sociologist. You're a preacher. What kind of church you preach in?" And in one of those moments, when you come up with just the right words, I said, I preach in a church that throws birthday parties for whores at 3:30 in the morning. I'll never forget his response. Never. He said, "No, you don't." "Nah, you don't." He said, "I would join a church like that." Wouldn't we all? Wouldn't we all love to belong to a church that threw birthday parties for whores at 3:30 in the morning? I got news for you. I got news for you. That is the kind of church that Jesus came to create. I don't know where we got this other one that's half country club. But Jesus came to create a people that would bring parties to those who have no parties, celebration into the lives of people who have nothing to celebrate. If all you've got to offer is a bowl of soup and some clothes, it's not enough. Jesus came and said, "I have come that my joy might be in you and that your joy might be full." And we've got to do more than just give them bread and clothes. We've got to bring love and joy into their lives.
And so, Father, and that's our prayer. But Lord, it's got to begin with us. It'd be easy to point a finger at the nameless, faceless mass called the church, but if barriers are going to be knocked down, and if the gospel's really going to get outside of the walls of this place, it'll have to begin with us. The Lord, I have no doubt that every one of us has people that have been brought into our life for the sole purpose of us sharing the love of God with them. Not just preaching it at them, but displaying it in our actions, in our grace, in our love. And in the midst of that, as St. Francis of Assisi said, maybe after all that, if we have to, we'll use words. God, that we wouldn't be afraid. And we wouldn't be afraid of the world. As if somehow the world's going to contaminate the gospel. Lord, the gospel, your good news, through your Spirit, changes lives. Father, we read here in the Word that when Cornelius and his family heard the message of the cross, that the Holy Spirit came on them and they began to praise you and to speak in tongues. And God, that they began to turn their hearts over to you. And Peter said, what prevents us? What prevents them from being baptized? What prevents us from baptizing them? And nothing. Father, we know that it's your work. If we just stay faithful to believing that there's power in the gospel, there's power in the good news of Jesus Christ. That we wouldn't have to rely on gimmicks and programs and manipulative sermons. God, all we would preach is that God loves every single person enough that He'd give His own Son to die, and that God would raise Him from the dead so that every person that would put their hope and trust in Him could have a new life, both now and in the life to come. That their sins would be washed away and they could live free, truly free, as people loved by the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Lord, I pray that this morning. And that, Lord, that our baptistry is warm and ready for any person that wants to say yes to this today. That's why you brought them here. And so, God, we love you. We thank you. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. So I'm going to ask that you stand with us as we sing one last song. And we invite you to go. Judy is there in our prayer corner. She would love to pray with you. I'm going to be up here, and I've got an empty seat right next to me. If this was for you this morning, if you're here because God brought you here to hear this, and you're like, today I want to become a Christian. Today I want to be baptized. Then come up next to me. Come up next to me. Let's pray it out, and let's do what God's led you to do this morning. So come as we sing.